My name is Abraham Suestes. I grew up in Mexico City. I moved to the States when I was 14 years old. And I'm going to jump right away into the things that have kind of shaped my life. And basically, one of them was moving from Mexico City to Arizona. And the second one is, I guess, a series of events, but mainly my parents. I grew up in a Christian home. My mom is a mix of, mixture between Billy Graham, that she can bring the fire and talk to a person, and that person like have a conviction from the Spirit. But she's also the kind of person who will go out and, just lay down her life for others. And my dad wasn't the same at all. My dad got baptized when I was 6 years old, kind of like as a way to say like, hey, I'm changing my life for you. And I try to give that back to him. When at 14 years old, after moving to the United States, I got baptized. But it wasn't, I wasn't really like following Jesus. I was just doing it for a show, I guess. I lost my dad when he was 19 years old, when I was 19 years old. And the church that I grew up in used to preach that if you didn't pray hard enough or if you weren't good enough, you would not get healed. Thank you. That was very hard for me to deal with. And I ended up leaving the church a whooping 3 weeks. Because there was a group of, at a local college group that I had relationships with some people from that college group, but they were just showing me that worshiping Jesus and following Jesus and serving Jesus was the way that my mom was actually doing it all this time, as opposed to the way that I was being told at the church where we were going. That if you want to serve Jesus, it has to be within the confines of the church or confines of our congregation. You don't have to go to school to become a doctor. You don't have to go to school to become a teacher. The job that you have right now is good enough for you to serve Jesus, which it's true, but whenever you are being told every day that like, it's fine that just to stay there where you are, and it was just where it just wore on my heart a lot. Being compared, it was an old Hispanic church, and some of the kids that I grew up with, they would say that I'm acting all white because I'm going to school and I'm getting the best grades that I can, or because I want to go to college. So anyway, I saw the biggest transformation in my dad. He was, like I mentioned, he kind of walked with the Lord, but he was a gambler most of his life, except for the last year that I got to share with him. I got offered a full ride scholarship to go study somewhere else out of town, leave my family, but unfortunately I couldn't take that because I was here illegally. But I got to spend 1 year with my dad, taking care of him, and as he was sick, and also with him, just that year seeing his walk with the Lord, going from like barely walking with God to like days before he died saying like, hey, I have my entire life I've done whatever I wanted. Nobody can tell me what I want tonight. If your mom tells me what to do, I'll get mad, but I'm getting to the point where I know that God has my life in his hands. And if tomorrow God tells me to go to China to preach the gospel, I'm gonna go to China. And he passed away 3 days later. And just to see that change in his life through that last year of his life was what actually kept me going, and I moved to a different church, and I just all of a sudden was surrounded by people who were not only celebrating what I was or who I was, but also fighting for me. And my wife and I decided to move to Seattle about 6 years ago, and through a blog post, we found out about Mosaic. And I contacted Brian Easland, and he had coffee with me one day. Like, he didn't have to. Just one time I asked the staff at Mosaic, hey, like, I'm moving to Seattle. Can somebody tell me what life is like in Seattle for families? And she's like, sure, we'll have a pastor who would love to do that with you. And so from that day, we knew that Mosaic was going to be our home. I called, I was offered a job, and they told me I need you here in 2 weeks. And I called Mosaic and I said, hey, do you guys happen to know anybody who has a room? And within 24 hours, I had 3 offers. And yeah, that's why we are here.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Trini, and I was born in Chile, South America. And I grew up with a very, very, very big family, and so always surrounded by people and cousins, and we just had a blast, a very collectivist society. We moved to America in 2007, something around that time, and it was very lonely. It was just me, my parents, and my brothers, which I know is family, but for us, that's like a very small portion of your family. And I didn't speak any English, so my response to everything was okay, which got me in a lot of trouble, actually. I remember my first year of school, so again, very different cultures. I walked in and it was a male teacher, and we greet with a kiss on the cheek. It's actually like cheek to cheek, it's not really like. And so I go up in front of the class and I greet him the way that we greet in my own country. And so that was my first experience realizing I was in a very different culture. And I went to elementary school in Bellevue. So we were the only Latino family in the school. So I was trying really hard to be white, to be American white. And when I went to middle school, it was a very, very diverse middle school. And we had all a big range of socioeconomic status and just ethnicity and immigration status. And so I was like, I found my people. Like, I could speak in Spanish and we could dance the way that we did at home. And that's actually what really shaped me, was realizing that I look white, and obviously I have a lot of European blood because they came and took over Chile. And so I was treated very differently than the people I identified with. And there were multiple experiences that were very infuriating as a child even. But I learned from a very young age that I had a privilege and a responsibility to share my experiences and share the experiences of my people who aren't heard all the time. So navigating that was really hard, but definitely has shaped me in everything that I do, really. It also was really hard for me to develop an identity. I felt like I never left home, but I look white, so people were like, oh no, like, you're American, like, just get over it. Like, you speak English now, you've been here for so many years. And it's very frustrating because it's almost like it erases who I am. And it's almost like they're taking ownership of my story. So I had a lot of identity issues, and thank you, Jesus, for speaking identity into me. So, man, he's great. So that was, I think, a big part of shaping me and my passion for racial justice and just justice in general. And then a second kind of aspect that shaped me, so I had a lot of trauma as a child, so I thought nothing better than to become a trauma therapist. And so I began doing this work officially a year ago, and I thought, I kind of had an idea of what trauma was, right? And so I went in kind of thinking I knew what I was going to do, and I began working at a community mental health clinic. So it's a lot of low-income families, a lot of immigrants who don't have access to insurance. And I realized I ended up treating a lot of racial trauma and a lot of immigration trauma. So children who, parents got pulled over for a traffic stop, and they were deported, and the children didn't know. Children whose houses have been raided and parents have been taken away, and they end up in foster care. So it's been really infuriating. I think it's an honest answer, but also heartbreaking. And just, I see a lot of resilience in them. And I guess just being in Washington, I was under the impression it's like a very, woke state. And I think when you really start to pay attention, it really isn't as much as we'd hope that it is. So it's really shaped me and my, just my view, I guess, on everything and my passion. Again, how did I come to Jesus? Okay, I was born into a Catholic family, and so I grew up, I like to say cultural Catholic, so we all go to church. Man, do they. Very Sunday Catholic, for a better lack of a better word. And then when I was in college, I was at Lake Chelan, and the family I was with, my friend got asked to play for a worship team at a camp, and so I went. I'd never seen the Christian community of the church. I thought Catholicism was like it, and there was nothing more to Christianity. And it was worship, and I saw people with their hands up, and I was like, what is wrong with these people? What are they doing with their hands up? And I remember sitting in the back and just being kind of in shock. By the third day I was at the front, my hands were up, tears down my face, and I was like, I love this. I feel Jesus for the first time in my life. I don't know if you guys see me on Sundays, but I really just, man, do I love worshiping. And then college started, and kind of like Marshall and Casey shared, I try and run away from Jesus, I'll tell you. Just got very, very lost. I was really hurt. And so, drinking and just kind of hookup culture, it's really hard to see it, that you're in it, and people make it very normal and encourage it. And so, but man, did the Lord not let me go. And I made it very clear as much as I tried. And then I met Ryan, and he kind of had a very similar story. We had both not gone to church for years. And kind of sharing that story was kind of like a wake-up call. And that's when we ended up coming to Mosaic for the first time. And like I said, I always felt very lonely for kind of always. I hated my birthday because it made me miss my grandparents and cousins. And I remember, just going to Mosaic and walking out and looking at Ryan, and I said, oh my gosh, it felt like home. And then we joined life group. Actually, you met us that day. And then we joined life group, and in October, and my birthday came around in November, and that was the first time I didn't hate my birthday. So I've been part of Mosaic for almost 3 years, and I think it's the first time where I don't feel alone. And I feel like I have family, and I look forward to holidays and birthdays because I don't feel alone anymore. So thank you for that just culture that you guys have created. And Jesus is good, that God is just so good, and I just think this is an awesome, awesome community. And just a lot of people I talk to say that it feels like family and it feels like home. So good job, and thank you.
Hey, my name is Jason, and I've been going to Mosaic now for 4 years. Can't believe that. 4 years, Andrew. That's wild. My wife and I started looking for a church. She's been in Seattle longer than I have. And there was about 10 churches on the list. We were getting depressed. Got down to Mosaic. And at the time where we were living, it was only 10 minutes away from us. So I said, hon, let's go to this church, Mosaic. Try it out. Good news is, if it sucks, it's only 10 minutes away. I'm not wasting any time. It didn't suck. And connected with Andrew that Sunday, and have been just walking with him in relationship since. And I'm thankful for the people I'm getting to know. Have gotten to know the Fergusons, Abraham, others, and just look forward to what God is doing in Mosaic during this time. A little bit about me. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in an area called Sunset Park. It's a heavy Latino area. I come from a history of pastors. My great grandmother on my dad's side was the first ordained Latina minister in New York City, which is pretty cool. My dad is a pastor, full-time ministry for 40 years now. My younger brother's a pastor. My older brother's a pastor. Probably one of my sisters will end up in ministry as well. And God chose not to call me to be a pastor for many good reasons. Just, not my wheelhouse. But I grew up in that culture, and I can't remember when I got saved. I can't remember when I started praying in the Spirit. I mean, it was just the DNA of the household. Emphasis on prayer, emphasis on faith, emphasis on the prophetic and the supernatural. I would even have to check with my parents before I had friends come over, because in case there was a prayer meeting, I'd probably want to avoid bringing them over, because it was just like, a madhouse upstairs, people praying, and they'd be asking me, my friends, like, what language is that? What's going on there? Don't worry about it. Let's get back to what we were doing. So it's always been part of the DNA of me. And my dad, thankfully, ingrained in me from a child, just how to discipled me and how to think biblically, how to apply the biblical issues and standards to societal topics, and that really enlivened me. That's where I found my wheelhouse, is developing a biblical worldview and speaking to culture and thinking biblically, but sometimes having to speak secularly because you're not sharing the same assumptions as someone else. And that's always been a value for me. And even though I grew up in a Latino area, the church was Latino, played basketball, most of my teammates and friends, either black or brown. I mean, it was never, I never found my identity because of my parents in associating with people just because of their skin color. It was always about who they were as people, what was the common bond we had. And for me, it was finding the common bond as a brother or sister in Christ. And that was our foundation. Those are the people who I wanted to have a relationship with. I was taught never to assign value to someone or prejudge someone whom I'd never talked to, never met, just because of the color of their skin. And that helped shape my thought processes moving forward. And there are two things that really, in light of this conversation, had an impact in my life, shaped me. And one is the area I grew up in, New York City. Many people here may not remember New York City in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s. I was born in 1983. And we were in a pretty bad area, not one of the worst areas, but still pretty bad. So bad that I could not go to the neighborhood park, which was only down the block from us, because it was riddled with crime. There was gang activity all the time. There was drug activity all the time. There was prostitution all the time. And I didn't know that to me, that was normal. Like asking my dad, why are those women so, where are their clothes? Imagine a 5-year-old asking daddy, where are their clothes? Aren't they cold? And he's having to explain to me, have these conversations at a young age, why they're barely wearing any clothes, or having to explain why we can't go to the park, or having to explain to me, be careful when you're outside. We even had areas, it's a joke now in our family, because my parents eventually were able to save up and move to a better area, but we had bats stationed around the house. It was like a serious thing. It was like, if something pops off, everyone knew where to get the bat and go. And there were some times where that actually had to happen. Nothing, I won't get into that, but it was normal. Like, it was normal. We even had bats in the car. It was just a normal, and that's not normal, right? For a lot of people, it's not normal. For me, it was a totally normal experience. My wife says I'm way too protective now. I was like, well, you didn't know where I grew up. That's why I'm way protective. Shoot, even our au pair, Deborah, I'm like, you have your pepper spray on you, right? We don't even live in a bad area. Keep that pepper spray on you, Deborah. Rami, how do you use it? She showed, okay, good.
That's funny.
But that shaped me, and it also allowed me to realize that back in the early 90s, when the topic of criminal justice reform was spoken, it was not criminal justice reform today, because in hindsight, people can look back and say, oh, maybe penalties are too stiff, or maybe there's too heavy of a police presence. But we were thankful for a heavier police presence, because we kept getting communities that kept getting victimized by the same people over and over and over again, and you had these rogue judges who would allow these criminals back on the street to victimize the same people. It was like citizens were prisoners in their own communities. And it was an awful, awful thing. And thankfully, New York City, for the most part, it doesn't have the same crime problem it did, but I understand now, looking back, why there was such an emphasis on law enforcement back in the early 90s. And many times in the conversations, people forget why that was, and when we're talking about it today. So it was one thing that shaped me for sure. Second thing was when I went off to college. And growing up in New York City, even when we moved to a better area, you walked a few blocks. You're in the Latino area, you walked another few blocks. Asian area, walked another few blocks. More Italian, Irish. And for me, what was awesome about it is the food options. This was peak diversity for me. It was amazing. We'd march in the Puerto Rican Day Parade with many members of our church. We'd go to the Greek festival by our house. I marched as a kid in the Norwegian Day Parade. I'm not Norwegian, but I was marching in the Norwegian Day Parade, even having Norway's flag. I don't know. And I value those experiences, because to me, diversity was you can celebrate sort of these cultural benign differences and you learn from each other, and especially you can see different food options, different dress options, just way people experience different culture. But at the end of the day, not only for communities that were Christian, the Word of God is our guiding light, but also we were an American. We were an American who shared the same ethos, and you can celebrate diversity under that context. So I go off to college, and I'm a freshman, and they have all these different clubs to sign up, and I signed up for the Multicultural Student Union. And I'm thinking this is gonna be awesome, I'm gonna get some awesome. And I went to school in Bristol, Rhode Island. It was just a demographic, so it was mostly white.
Right.
I mean, I got a financial aid to play basketball there. I was I'm going to get out of New York City, experience something different. It was going from New York City, Brooklyn, New York, the largest borough, to Bristol, Rhode Island. Was very different. But so I signed up for the Multicultural Student Union, and I'm all right, I'm going to speak to hot chicks and get some good food. Multi-ethnic chicks and some good food. That was my thinking. And little did I know, and I think it's gotten worse in academia today, but the word diversity was weaponized. So when I got there, it was a us versus them mentality. And even my school, this is the funniest thing, there were very few Hispanic kids on campus, very few. And somehow my roommates were all Hispanic. Mm-hmm. All Hispanic. And I said, what are the odds that they just 5 Hispanic kids and 3 of us are rooming together on campus? And sure enough, it wasn't a coincidence. They put us there because they thought they would feel more comfortable. And I said, what a patronizing attitude. You know nothing about me, you know nothing about them, but you assume just because we're Hispanic or have Hispanic blood that somehow we're going to have a common value and a common identity in that, and you know nothing of it. And one of the kids I roomed with, he was adopted. His parents were Jewish. He was a Buddhist. Oh, wow. Who came from Colombia. We couldn't have been any different. Later I found out he was selling drugs out of the room too. But that another story. But you gotta make your money somehow, I guess.
That's right.
And so when I'm with the Multicultural Student Union, it was like a grievance attitude. They constantly wanted to pin those in the club versus the rest of the school community, as though we were warring factions against each other. And that I finally told them, I was like, listen, I'm not down with that. They would say things like, no, we got to, us Latinos have to stick together. It's a dangerous community. I'm like, a dangerous why? Just because there's few of us here, is it somehow dangerous? Are we somehow marginalized because we don't have as many numbers? I said, sorry, I reject that attitude, and I found people who I had common bonds with, and it wasn't based on their skin color, because I was told from a young age, you never assign value to someone. You never prejudge someone just because of how they look. And even the word privilege, right? White privilege is like chic in academic circles today. It wasn't when I was a student, but the same type of pretext was there. And that was these broad swipes against folks based on the color of their skin, and embedded grievances based on the color of your skin, and prepackaged sins and guilt. And I said, I'm not going to be a part of that. It got even worse. They wanted me gone. I didn't want to be there anyway. When they found out that I would not ascribe to their progressive orthodoxy. They found out that, no, my voting patterns were based on life. My voting patterns were based on marriage. My voting patterns were based on the biblical prescribed jurisdictions in the Bible, which for me was a focus on a very small, limited government, an emphasis on the family, an emphasis on the church. And it didn't comport with them. And they would say to me, like, but you're Latino. How could you not vote this way? Or Latino, how could you not think this way? And I said, what? My doctor was supposed to stamp this on my birth certificate. Jason Matera, progressive, just because of my background. And so that shaped me, and realized that while many good intentions and well-meaning words may be out there in the vernacular, it taught me to peel the onion a little deeper to see what is actually being said, what is actually being meant, and will it engage in a harmonious relationship, or is it used to further divide us? And and I've just been thankful that I've had the opportunity to engage in conversations and help spot where there's more division. What's the end purpose? Is it division, or is the end purpose harmony?